Mr Green, you admit that you've told Craig White what he wanted to hear to get into Rangers. You've boasted about things to fans and investors that have been contradicted at a later stage. You admit to using languages in the offices of Ibrox which might be deemed as inappropriate or even racist. What does that say about you?
It says I'm honest. It says I speak it as I find.
Making statements that are contradicted at a later point and hoodwinking someone is honest.
Look, something that's contradicted, you can contradict anything.
The question used to be how cannabis was being smuggled into the UK, but the scale of these cannabis farms inside our cities and on our housing estates has been a game changer. Now, so much of the drug is grown right here in Scotland. More cannabis is being exported abroad than is coming in.
Peter Smith has this exclusive report.
STV News has obtained documentary evidence, but figures obtained by STV News through a Freedom of Information request.
Live now to reporter Peter Smith, who's at Glasgow University. Peter, was this a surprise?
Well, John, as we know in the traditions of British politics, it's usually a moderate candidate who's the favourite. They're not unionists so much as loyalists. I can tell that because of the songs that they're singing, the tattoos they have on and the flags that they're waving. They have a very clear political message that they're bringing to George Square tonight, and they have entered a standoff with the group of Yes supporters. At least 200 Rangers supporters are expected here in the next hour, and these are the 50 questions they've prepared to put directly to the people at the top of their club.
It seems diplomacy, whether by design or by accident, might now offer the US, Russia and Bashar al-Assad a way out of this standoff. Meanwhile, the Syrian civil war goes on, albeit contained, with bullets and bombs rather than chemicals, causing death each day.
How the EU would receive an independent Scotland and when is a hot issue in this referendum, where voters are demanding more information. Would we be in or would we be out?
White smoke billowing from the Sistine Chapel marks the appointment of a new pope.
You said that Imran Ahmed is your little packy friend. Is that normal language for people working at Rangers?
No, it's not normal language. It's not normal language for me.
Would you accept it from a player?
Would I accept it from a player? In terms of being said in a friendly way or in a disparaging way?
Either way.
When not every branch of the media is helping you get across the correct version of events or an accurate
But it's your
picture.
job to convince people, not the media's job. They have sensory rooms, music rooms, dance rooms, this kind of thing, for adults with learning disabilities. Is this in place in Tollcross?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question at the moment. I don't.
You're the executive member.
Yeah.
Pupils are now using apps that allow them to record an image and make it as offensive as they like before sharing it online. And here's the hook. Once it's been watched, it automatically self-deletes, making it almost impossible for schools to monitor. The emphasis is on participating and getting active. Head camera optional. Peter Smith, STV News, trying to get fit. A credit card-sized computer that these children are using to learn about programming and coding skills, the sort of thing that in future could see them building and working with robots like this. This is STV News. Good evening. Good evening. Ronnie Deila says tonight's Crunch Champions League qualifier in Iceland can be the first step for Celtic to go on a European run.
Now here's Peter with all the sport across Scotland today.
Hello again. Rangers manager Ali McCoist says he has no problem with the bets placed by Ian Black, including 3 against his own team.
Now, Rangers Chief Executive Charles Green has admitted he agreed to receive a payment of £25,000 from one of Craig White's business partners during the early stage of his buyout of the club. STV has obtained a recording in which Green personally asks White for the money. However, Green insists the cheque bounced and he never actually received the funds. Peter Smith has this exclusive report.
He denies having any relationship with Craig White, a man he calls discredited and a fantasist. But claims made by White over his involvement in the Sevco consortium's acquisition of Rangers now raise questions over how closely the pair worked together in that deal.
Well, next step is we've got to give them some money. Well, you heard what I just said.
Yeah.
So, now I've told him that, well, I'll have a serious conversation. I'll say, oh, Craig's gone. We can listen to conversation. Craig's gone. I'll definitely come over to your office. I've got my check. Yeah. And I'll go and give it, but I need money.
Yeah,
for you.
So if you give me your details, I'll cover whatever you've got to pay out. It's not,
what I'm saying
problem.
is there's no trace into my bank account.
Yeah.
But I'll do it now, write it down now.
A statement tonight from Rangers said claims made against Charles Green are now in the hands of their lawyers.
Aidan Earley, Craig White never invested one penny in the acquisition of those assets.
We've obtained evidence here that Craig White is claiming that he paid £25,000 into your bank account, Mr. Green. Is that true?
Well, Mr. White didn't pay money into my bank account. £25,000 cheque was put into my bank account.
This was for legal costs?
For legal costs. And 3 days later, the cheque bounced, and following this interview, I'll show you the bank statement that confirms that.
Charles Green did show me documentation which showed a cheque for £25,000 was paid into his account on the 11th of May and appeared to bounce 3 days later. However, STV News has obtained documentary evidence which appears to show Aidan Earley's business account for Liberty Capital paid a cheque for £25,000 on the 15th of May.
Craig White is also claiming he was duped over the transfer of Rangers' key assets. When Rangers' CVA to come out of administration failed, a new company was needed to protect the club and key assets from liquidation. Sevco 5088 had been set up and was waiting to acquire these. Craig White believes he was involved. But then Sevco Scotland came along. Ibrox Stadium, Murray Park and other vital assets for Rangers Football Club ended up here and under the control of Charles Green's consortium.
What was Craig White and Aidan Earley's role in Sevco 5088?
Well, neither of them had a role in Sevco 5088. That was a company formed by Phil Fisher Waterhouse for the purpose of acquiring Rangers. Of course, what everyone knows is that in the ensuing weeks, as the model unfolded, Sevco Scotland acquired Rangers, not 5088.
What was the purpose of you shifting the assets from Sevco 5088 to Sevco Scotland?
That never happened. That's never happened. The assets were never in 5088. Sevco 5088 never bought anything. Never there. End of conversation.
But this is contrary to what Rangers officially said at the time. They told us, for the avoidance of doubt, Sevco 5088 Limited bought the assets of the Rangers Football Club and then transferred them to Sevco Scotland Limited, so that all the assets would be in the Scottish registered company that is Rangers FC.
It also contradicts the proposed CVA document with Duff and Phelps, which clearly indicates that Sevco 5088 would be compelled to purchase the business and the assets of Rangers if a CVA failed, which of course it did.
You admit that you have told Craig White what he wanted to hear in order to get him to sell Rangers assets. Have you or Imran Ahmed ever misled the Rangers supporters by telling them what they wanted to hear?
Never.
Never?
Never.
You're clear about that?
Absolutely clear.
What about when you said that Manchester United were supportive of Rangers moving to the Premiership?
Yeah.
They've clearly said that they're against it.
The spokesman did. So do you think Alex Ferguson would like to see Rangers in this league?
So it was
Who's
Alex
Manchester
Ferguson.
United? You define Manchester United.
Who at Manchester United told you that you were wanted in the Premiership?
I've had discussions with a number of clubs.
Who at Manchester United told you that you were wanted in the Premiership?
Well, why do we want to know that?
Because I think there's evidence here that perhaps you've made a statement that has been contradicted by Manchester United. What about when Imran Ahmed told the group of Rangers supporters that talks with the Dallas Cowboys were going well?
Well, they are. I've got an email now, if you want to read it again after this interview.
For a link-up?
From Dallas, with Dallas Cowboys.
The Dallas Cowboys have previously told us that there was no such talks that they were aware of.
I don't care, Peter, what they've said. I've just told you categorically in front of camera that when this interview finishes, I will show you an email where we're invited to go to Dallas Cowboys. The email came in 3 days ago.
To this point, no such email has been presented to us. Tonight, a Dallas Cowboys spokesperson told STV they were unaware of any talks with Rangers.
Mr. Green, you admit that you've told Craig White what he wanted to hear to get into Rangers. You've boasted about things to fans and investors that have been contradicted at a later stage. You admit to using languages in the offices of Ibrox which might be deemed as inappropriate or even racist. What does that say about you?
It says I'm honest. It says I speak it as I find.
Making statements that are contradicted at a later point and hoodwinking someone is honest.
Look, something that's contradicted, you can contradict anything. Tell me what's proven. Let's not talk about contradictions. Look, everything I've said has been contradicted. Everything I've said has been contradicted. But nothing's been confirmed and nothing's been proven, Peter.
Cannabis farming is flourishing in Scotland. It's an illegal industry that exploits human trafficking to produce a potent drug. Its production here is now dominated by Vietnamese and Chinese gangs. They've been so successful, Scotland is now believed to be a net exporter of cannabis. Here's Scotland Tonight's Peter Smith.
Cannabis. It's the most commonly used illegal drug in Scotland.
Most cannabis users have only ever seen the drug like this, in a relatively small amount, or like this, in a joint.
This is the side to cannabis most users don't see. Farmed on an industrial scale by international crime gangs, and part of the trade in human trafficking.
Tôi không hề biết nơi tôi được đưa đến. Những cái tên gangster thì chúng nhốt tôi trong một căn hộ với hàng trăm cây cần sa.
We went inside Scotland's prisons to meet a Vietnamese victim of human trafficking. We've agreed to protect his identity because he was too scared to be filmed. His statement is read by an actor.
Chúng bắt tôi và chăm sóc các cây cần sa đó và chúng quan sát tôi cũng như giám sát tôi để đảm bảo rằng tôi không thể trốn thoát. Tôi không biết phải làm gì cả. Tôi có gia đình ở Việt Nam và tôi cũng rất ghét những tên buôn ma túy. Tuy nhiên ở đây tôi chỉ có một mình. Tôi không biết phải làm gì. Tôi rất lo tính mạng của mình. Tôi chỉ muốn sống. Tôi cảm thấy mình như là một nô lệ vô hình vậy.
This isn't a story of cannabis farming in a foreign country. This is cannabis made in Scotland. Commercial farming of cannabis is dominated by gangs from Vietnam and China. It was first seen on an industrial scale in Australia and in North America in the mid-90s. Profits were high and risks were low. Production soon reached Britain, and by 2007, thousands of cannabis farms were already flourishing.
Well, I think that there could have been a greater use of intelligence, that the problem was flagged up in 2007 and a seminar was created in order to educate Scotland on the issue. But it was delivered against a background that saw an interest in saying that cannabis was not as dangerous a substance as otherwise thought, and that perhaps we should take a softer approach to it. So we were slow to pick up.
The health dangers of smoking cannabis are well documented. The question is, how much do users know about where their weed comes from? Who's suffering so they can get high?
Tôi rời bỏ Việt Nam và đến nước Anh vì tôi hy vọng rằng mình sẽ được an toàn. Tôi không hề mong đợi rằng mình lại sẽ bị nhốt trong một trang trại cây cần sa. Nói thật là ở trong đó rất là khó thở. Và tôi cũng rất hiếm khi có đủ đồ ăn lẫn thức uống. Tôi cũng không bao giờ được ra ngoài. Chính vì vậy, khi thấy cảnh sát đến, tôi đã rất vui mừng. Tôi nghĩ rằng mình đã được giải cứu. Tôi không hề mong đợi mình lại sẽ bị nhốt ở trong tù.
The trafficking of people to work in Scottish cannabis farms has been compared with a modern slave trade. They work 24 hours a day without pay, and if police come calling, it's the gardener, not the gangsters, who go to prison.
Some of these young people have been sexually abused. They're terrified to talk about that. And the criminals use the fact that the police are arresting them to continually coerce them, to threaten them, to say, don't tell the truth because you'll be arrested. The real traffickers and the real criminals are not even being touched.
The question used to be how cannabis was being smuggled into the UK, but the scale of these cannabis farms inside our cities and on our housing estates has been a game changer. Now, so much of the drug is grown right here in Scotland. More cannabis is being exported abroad than is coming in.
Cannabis is big business for organised crime, and in Scotland, it's thriving.
Teaching unions say the misuse of mobile phone cameras is a widespread and growing problem in Scottish schools. Images taken from the classroom are posted online and sometimes doctored to attack other pupils and teachers. Unions say they've already taken legal action, but as Peter Smith reports, they're calling on the Scottish Government to provide schools with more powers.
This is a school class of 9 and 10-year-olds.
What are you going to do? Hit me? No, and then hit me.
This behaviour is nothing new, but the technology used to record it and share it online is.
You should be ashamed of yourself. Oh, it's not shame! Primary 6, and you're going things to your classmates.
This is unbelievable.
Tidy up and go home.
Teachers say smartphones with HD cameras are now commonplace in schools and they're increasingly misused by pupils in the classroom.
I've dealt personally with a number of situations which have involved malicious comments, doctored photographs, someone being accused of being racist because of the way a certain thing has been filmed. We're very keen that schools treat all of these issues very seriously. In a number of situations we've insisted upon the police being involved.
The most serious of all though is that where a teacher is being accused of paedophilia, and that's an actual case that we've had to deal with this year. Now that is appalling, appalling for the teacher, appalling for the teacher's family.
It's not just the teachers who are vulnerable. Pupils are now taking pictures and videos of other children in school changing rooms and sharing it on the internet. Katie McGrath has just left high school and now wants to become a teacher. She's well aware of how mobile phone cameras are being used in class.
Taking pictures of other people in the class that they're not knowing and like making fun of them or not, like things like that, or like even taking pictures of the teacher and then making fun of the teacher. There's been a couple of times that I've seen that people have uploaded pictures of teachers to Facebook and said not so very nice things about them and things, so like things like that.
How common is it that pupils are using phones in school?
Extremely common.
The Scottish Government says a complete ban on phones in schools wouldn't work, but teachers have been given guidelines for managing the use of mobiles.
We can't regulate for every different change that there is in the technology as it happens, because the technology moves so quickly. What we need to do is provide schools and teachers with the support and confidence to cope with those changes.
Teaching unions say they need more powers to handle pupils' phones when the rules are breached.
If somebody takes a video of a teacher in a classroom, and this happens a lot, then the school should have immediate access to that mobile phone. At the moment they don't, because it's data protected.
But even that might not work. The technology is always evolving and pupils are now using apps that allow them to record an image and make it as offensive as they like before sharing it online. And here's the hook. Once it's been watched, it automatically self-deletes, making it almost impossible for schools to monitor.
Most schools in Scotland go back this week, and many pupils will have new smartphones as well as new uniforms. Teachers are relying on the government guidelines being smart enough to keep up. Peter Smith, STV News.
Scotland's relationship with the European Union has become one of the main battlegrounds in the independence referendum. If there's a yes vote, would an independent Scotland automatically become a member of the EU, or would it have to apply to join from outside? Peter Smith came to Brussels to weigh up the competing arguments.
Scotland is a European nation. Resource-rich Scotland would be welcome. Anybody with an ounce of sense knows that.
The Spanish Foreign Secretary says Scotland would have to apply to be in the EU and would be at the back of the queue.
Scotland's been a member of the EU for 40 years.
He needs the governments of every single one of 28 countries to agree to his demands.
Bruxelles, capitale de l'Europe.
Both sides in this referendum debate are deeply entrenched over an independent Scotland's place in Europe. Their positions can be boiled down to two basic points inside these two weighty documents. First, the Scottish Government's White Paper says Scotland could renegotiate the terms of its EU membership from within the European Union. Meanwhile, the UK Government says Scotland would be applying as a new country outside the EU, trying to get in.
The Scottish Government says there would be an 18-month gap between a yes vote in the referendum and any formal independence, while Scotland is still part of the UK and still inside the EU. They believe that's enough time to agree terms, so that when Independence Day arrived in March of 2016, Scotland would already be a member of the European Union. But the UK government says Scotland would have to wait until it was an independent country before it could even begin an application for EU membership. That would mean a period of European limbo and uncertainty over what conditions new members may have to accept, like whether Scotland would have to join the Euro currency union or the borderless Schengen area. So who's right? That could be up to the 28 current members of the European Union. It only takes one veto to block Scotland altogether. None have declared they would object, but some are taking a close interest in developments.
The Spanish government will undoubtedly veto Scotland because of Catalonia and Basque Country, you know. They would never do this because if they accept Scotland, they are setting a precedent that for Spain is lethal. They can have for sure that Spain would veto Scotland.
While Vidal Quadras is Vice President of the European Parliament, he doesn't speak for the Spanish government. Some of his countrymen think Europe could welcome Scotland.
Scotland is now European Union, so it would be only an internal enlargement process. So with political will, it should not take more than 1, 2, 3 years time.
The current President of the European Commission, José Manuel Barroso, has said he believes EU membership for an independent Scotland would be extremely difficult, if not impossible. The Scottish Government says it's not up to Barroso or his Commission, and they've taken comfort from expert opinion elsewhere.
There cannot be a question that a country which fulfills the conditions, which wants to be a member, would become a member. And we shouldn't forget that it would be in the interest of the rest of the UK to have Scotland in. And I cannot see other countries, the institutions, voting against Scotland if the rest of the UK wants to have Scotland in.
The vote is now closed.
It's written into the Lisbon Treaty that after next month's elections, there can only be 750 seats, plus a president, in the European Parliament. Adding an independent Scotland would mean taking seats away from other members and rebalancing power.
We saw it with Croatia. It was very, very difficult. It might be that there is no way to get seats. There's no way to get a unanimity. There's no way really to come back to the European Union. And I would be utmost unhappy to lose our Scottish people.
How the EU would receive an independent Scotland and when is a hot issue in this referendum, where voters are demanding more information. Would we be in or would we be out? But it's likely the European Union will only answer that question if and when it has to, in the event of Scotland voting for independence.